Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the home international from the weekend. I just picked up some random guy to talk about it. It's Alan Scotthorne. Don't know if he's any good or not, so I thought I'd grab him. He was there at the weekend, so we thought we'd have a little chat about it. It was a really good competition. I'm glad to see the home international back. I mean, something you've fished in the past, isn't it?
Yeah, I've fished on loads of occasions, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, those home internationals are. I was always something I looked at when I was younger, thinking, oh, maybe that's my chance, you know, to fish for England. So it's nice to see that back, and nice to see several anglers who hadn't fished for England yet on that as well. When you go into Ireland, or when you're going away anywhere with England, the first thing is preparation. I mean, we were talking on the phone all the time, talking about what we were going to prepare, what we were going to take, weren't we? You know, a lot of different things, but the fishing was really interesting. When we got there, one of the main things that we found out, first of all, is loads of fish in the venue. The Newry Canal is somewhere I've never fished. Have you ever fished there? Or?
I fished it once, probably when I was about 20 years old, which we called on way back from fishing a festival at Enniskillen, and just had a few hours fishing, to be honest.
Right, so literally we're going blind, aren't we? We're talking a long while ago, but they told us there was loads of fish, and we were fishing with bloodworm and joker, so it was always going to be quite interesting. On the first day, first of all, I think the first thing we want to talk about, or I want to talk about, is the venue itself. When you look at it, we're on the Steyne here today, and it looked quite similar to this, to be honest, but it was a lot deeper. But the first thing that was amazing, me and Alan were sat sort of 15 yards apart, and my peg was 15 foot deep from a top 5 outwards, and yours was like 6 foot deep, wasn't it? I mean, it's completely different.
This is one problem. When you sit down to practice, you do want quite uniform pegs, and of course, on this occasion we were unlucky that the bottom weren't so even in the 7 pegs that we fished. I mean, my peg, for some reason, where the loaded coal barges or something, we've no idea, there was a hump in the peg where in front of me on a top 5 were only sort of quite shallow, maybe 5-6 foot
really
deep.
Shallow, yeah. And I think things like that make a massive difference to how you approach the peg, because then, you know, when we're talking about rigs afterwards, if we're talking about, say, using 1.5 grams, and Alan's looking at me thinking, 1.5 grams, why would you use that in that depth? Unless you talk about it amongst yourselves, you can be a little bit, you can make wrong decisions. So it's really important that you look at things like that, and we do that quite a lot. So really, really interesting. The first day was...
It is amazing how many times we go on these international type practices, and the 6 or often 5 pegs, 6 pegs that we fish normally, I mean, on this occasion we fish 7, are very, very different. It's amazing how many times that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it standing on the bank before. You know, you can tell differences in depth, even flow, where the river can change very slightly. There can be something jutting out. We had it in Slovakia, didn't we? With big rocks and things like that.
Rivers are probably worse than what canals are. I mean, canals normally are quite even, aren't they?
So when people talk about practicing, they think, oh, he's been practicing, they know all about it. It's not as simple as that. It's not just as simple as wherever you sit down in practice is the same as the match, and that was quite clear again when we were there. Our first day weights were quite impressive. We had sort of between 8 and 15 pound. I had about 10 pound. I think Alan had a bit more than me, and it was interesting because one of the first things we found, even though there was loads of fish, we couldn't really give them a lot of bait, could we? It was weird.
This is the thing, when you sit down and practice on your own, it's very difficult to sort of sum something up. But when there's 7 of you, what we found that the anglers that fed the least in a spot had a less attacking line. That were always the best line, and it didn't matter where it were in the canal, whether it were full distance at 13 or short.
No, it didn't matter.
So it just varied. That we all fished slightly different, but very apparent were the less bait were the better area.
Yeah, it was amazing when we were all talking at the end. All of a sudden it was like, well, somebody who put 4 or 5 balls in had, compared to somebody who put 20 in, that the lesser line, like Alan says, was completely the best. So when we sat down the second day, it was almost like we had this giant head start on ourselves, because we all made sure we had a line where we didn't feed any bait, and weights went through the roof. I mean, we both had 15 pound next day, you know, that we had up to 20 pound down on the end, lots of roach and perch, and the fishing was really good. So I think we were quite confident going into the weekend that we'd sussed a major factor, hadn't we?
Yeah.
Which, you know, if you can get something like that, it's huge. But it's very, very important. Going into the match, I drew an A section. gave me a chance to draw an A1. I think I was odds-on favourite to be on A1, weren't I? So I drew A3, which I always thought there was going to be a few fish there. It was slightly different to the rest of the length, but A4 was also an MPEG. I'm getting my excuses in early because I had a really enjoyable match catching lots of fish, but the fish were small. They were a small stamp. I had 7 kilos, which is fantastic fishing. Unfortunately, A1 and A4 had a lot better stamp fish than me, probably less fish than what I've had, but better stamp, and they've beat me with 8 kilo each. So that was quite interesting. It was interesting that the fish can be a bigger stamp in different areas. Maybe I got it slightly wrong, but I felt like I hadn't. I felt like I was catching the fish every chuck in, so it's very difficult to pick a bigger stamp up. But elsewhere down the match length, we'd done really well. The trouble was there was odd bonus fish, which you experienced a bit of that problem, didn't you?
I think one thing that we probably failed to mention, conditions on actual match were horrendous aside of what they were in practice. I mean, in practice we had good conditions where it were quite calm. And we all know in the England team how important it is to put your rig in correctly to catch fish quickly. And of course the first 2 hours of the match was very, very difficult, where it sort of cut down the amount of fish that you were catching because you couldn't actually put your rig in properly because of wind. The wind were ridiculous.
The wind was horrendous, and you were more wrestling your pole than you were just trying to fish properly, weren't you? So it made a big difference, and that towards the end that was difficult then to get ahead and difficult to stand out. So bonus fish made a big difference, and your section of one with Scottish angler with 2 great big hybrids, didn't he? To just beat you.
He had 3 big hybrids actually.
Did he? 3, did he?
Next to me on one section, I was second with 6 kilos. Still great fishing, but of course, you know, I think, you know, the fact that you couldn't fish right for the first 2 hours made it difficult to put a net of small fish together, and them odd bonus fish made a big difference.
They did make a big difference. We were lucky elsewhere. We fished well. We had a few bonus fish. We had some great performances. James Dent in particular won the match with 11 kilos, which is fantastic fishing.
When you think it's only 4 hours as well.
Oh, 4 hours, and they're all small fish. There's a lot of fish, so it was very, very good. And then that gave us a lead going into the second day, but only 4.5 points. It wasn't a massive lead over the Scottish, who had done fantastically
when
well.
There's 4 teams, it's difficult to get in front by any margin.
That's right, yeah. It's always going to be tight, but I think the Scottish deserve a mention after the first day. I mean, they scored 14.5 points. They'd sussed out not a lot of bait, which was massive, and that gave them a massive start for the next day. On the second day, and this is what I just briefly want to talk about, it was a bit like today. It was flat calm, there was no wind, and we'd had a boatload of rain overnight. Everyone fishing the match would have put a great deal of money on the fishing just being the same as it had been for the last 3 days, or better, yeah. But the exact opposite happened. All the cold rain knocked the roach completely on the head, and for the first 2-3 hours of the match, most anglers struggled to catch any roach. I mean, I caught half a dozen. Did you catch any roach for the first bit of the match?
A few and then nothing then for sort of 2 hours, middle 2 hours were catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, the venue was full of perch, wasn't it? Yeah. Absolutely full of perch. You could keep putting something in the net, and I think that's what's made the difference for us on the second day, because where we could, we've kept putting those perch in the net.
It's quite funny that, because often, I mean, we're not staying in canal today. Often when you get a boatload of rain, this canal don't fish well after a lot of rain, so it might be a uniform thing with canals.
Yeah, I think it's that colder, fresher water. I think the fish just puts them down, and they're not keen to feed. You can catch them, but it is important to catch those other fish, and we had a great surge catching perch. And I think when the roach came on later on, we were already ahead, and I think that we can then catch a few fish. Alan, you won your section 4.5 kilos, didn't you?
4.5 for a difficult end. I mean, 2 kilos won the bottom section, where you'd caught 8 kilos the day before, just to say how, you know, difficult it had become, really.
Yeah, it completely changed. I mean, I've had 5 kilos, again, probably 3 kilos of perch, and then 2 kilos of roach late on, which was the difference. And we'd done that throughout. We were quite fortunate in a way, because James Dent had a terrible peg. He suffered a bit. I felt a bit sorry for James because he fished a great match first day, and he dropped down to second, and we also had another second. But apart from that, 5 wins and 2 seconds, a tremendous result for us. So I think we were over the moon. That gave us a chance to win the competition, which was great. And Matt Derry, he drew my peg. He was on the end peg. I can't believe he stole my peg off me. did really well, fished great first day, won the match second day, and was individual champion with 2 wins. So
Yeah, brilliant.
you know, brilliant really.
Good performance.
Yeah, really good performance, especially from, you know, we had anglers who hadn't fished before, we had anglers with loads of experience like Alan. That combination worked really well. So I hope that it continues next year. We'd love to see it in England, wouldn't we? Something like
Yeah,
that.
it would
But
be brilliant, yeah.
you know, I think that competition's got a chance to go from strength to strength, and I think we'd have a lot of people come and watch it because there's a lot of great anglers on show.
I mean, when we go on international duty, a lot of these teams are improving all the time, especially on continent. And of course, the Irish, the Welsh, and also the Scottish are also improving. So it makes for a good match.
Yeah, it makes for a brilliant match. And I think unless we keep doing things like that, we're going to fall behind, aren't we? We need to keep fishing those events where we can. So, yeah, it was all very good and a very good weekend. Anyway, we've fed a bait, so we're itching to get in for a fish today. So catch up with you later. Thanks.
Cheers.